I never expected my life to change because of a shared cup of bitter alien tea. At the time, I was just another human contractor stationed on Karen Station, a massive orbital hub circling the violet gas giant Vale 9. The station was neutral ground, part diplomatic crossroads, part trade nexus, and part refugee shelter for species displaced by border wars. Humans were still considered newcomers in the galactic community, tolerated more than trusted. I worked maintenance. That meant long hours in pressure tunnels, recalibrating environmental systems meant for biology wildly different from my own. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me fed and gave me a front row seat to the galaxy. That's where I met Siri. She was Ilari, tall and willowy, with skin that shimmered like moonlight on water and eyes that shifted colors depending on emotion. To most species, Ilari were intimidating, descendants of an ancient matriarchal civilization that once ruled entire sectors. To me, she was just lonely. Our friendship started quietly. We'd sit in the station's underused observation ring, watching Vale IX's storms roll beneath us. She liked asking questions about Earth, oceans, rain, music. I liked listening to her stories about Ilari floating cities and their tradition of memory singing, where history was preserved through living voices instead of machines. We were friends. Just friends. At least, that's what I told myself. Siri laughed differently around me. Softer, less guarded. She trusted me with things she never shared with other Ilari. And I trusted her, too, even when whispers spread through the station that her family wasn't just influential, but powerful. I didn't know how powerful. The day everything changed began like any other. I was repairing a cracked coolant conduit when Siri appeared at the hatch, her expression unusually tense. Her skin shimmered a pale silver, a sign of anxiety.
"You're needed," she said.
"That sounds ominous," I replied, wiping coolant residue from my gloves. Did I break something again? She didn't smile. "My mother has arrived at the station." I froze. "Your mother?" Siri nodded. High Matron Ilithra of the Ilari Concord. The name hit me like decompression. I'd heard it before, in news bulletins, diplomatic briefings, quiet conversations that stopped when humans walked by. The High Matron wasn't just a political leader. She was a symbol. Ilari society revolved around their matriarchs, and Ilithra was considered one of the most formidable figures in known space. "And she wants to see me?" I asked carefully. Siri hesitated. "She asked about you." The audience chamber was nothing like the rest of Karen Station. Ilari architecture favored open space and living materials. Light filtered through translucent walls grown from crystalline coral, and the air hummed softly, as if alive. High Matron Ilithra sat on a raised platform, her presence commanding without effort. Her skin glowed with deep opalescent hues, and her eyes, ancient, sharp, and assessing, locked onto me the moment I entered. I bowed awkwardly. "High Matron, I'm honored." She studied me in silence. It felt like being weighed, measured, and judged all at once. "You're smaller than I expected," she said at last. I swallowed. I get that a lot. To my surprise, the corner of her mouth curved upward. "You speak plainly. That is uncommon among diplomats." "I'm not one," I said. "Just maintenance." "Yet my daughter chooses your company." The room seemed to tighten around us. "She speaks of you often," Ilithra continued. "She laughs when she does." Siri stood rigid beside me, her skin flushed with deep blue embarrassment. "Ilithra," she said softly, "this isn't." "Hush," her mother replied, without looking away from me. I wished to hear the human speak. I met the High Matron's gaze, heart pounding. "Siri is my friend. That's all." Ilithra tilted her head. "Is it?" I didn't answer. After a long moment, she gestured for us to leave.
Go.
We will speak again.
We didn't talk much after that.
Rumors spread quickly. Some said the Ilari were negotiating new alliances. Others whispered about political marriages, ancient practices rarely used but still feared. Humans weren't part of those stories. I told myself I was imagining the tension, that nothing had changed. Until Siri came to my quarters late one cycle, her skin glowing a stormy indigo. "She likes you," she said abruptly. I blinked. "Who?" "My mother." The words didn't register at first. "She what?" Siri paced the small room, her movements agitated. She asked me questions. About your character, your loyalty, your willingness to sacrifice. I stared at her. Why would she care? Siri stopped and looked at me, her eyes bright and terrified. Because she believes you would be a good bonded partner. My heart stopped. So what? In Ilari culture, she said quietly, bonding is not merely romantic. It is political, spiritual, eternal. I laughed, sharp and disbelieving. Siri, I'm human. I fix pipes. You saved 3 Ilari during the reactor breach last cycle, she said. You didn't know who they were. You acted anyway. The memory surfaced, heat, alarms, pulling unfamiliar bodies to safety. That doesn't mean. She believes you would die for those you care for, Siri said. And she values that above lineage. Silence filled the room. I never meant for this, Siri whispered. I never thought she'd notice. I looked at my hands, suddenly unsure of everything. And you? What do you want? She hesitated. Her skin softened into warm gold. I don't know, she said honestly. But the thought of losing you because of this hurts more than I expected. Events moved quickly after that. A radical faction opposed to Ilari-human cooperation sabotaged the station stabilizers, throwing Karen into chaos. Gravity fluctuated. Hull breaches spread. Panic erupted across decks. I was on duty when the first explosion hit. Without thinking, I ran toward the damage.
So did Siri.
We worked side by side, sealing breaches, rerouting power, pulling civilians to safety. At one point, a structural collapse trapped us in a maintenance shaft as oxygen levels dropped. I could feel my chest tightening, vision blurring. Siri pressed her forehead to mine, her bioluminescence brightening. Stay with me. When rescue finally came, I was barely conscious. I woke in a medical chamber, lungs aching, body weak. High Matron Ilithra stood at my bedside. You risked your life for my daughter, she said softly. I tried to sit up and failed. I'd do it again. She watched me carefully. In Ilari history, she said, true bonds are forged not by words, but by action. She placed a hand over her heart. You have proven yourself. Tears stung my eyes. I never wanted power or status. I know, she said. That is why you are worthy. Siri appeared beside her, eyes shining. I will not force this, Ilithra continued. The choice remains yours. Both of you. She turned and left us alone. Recovery took weeks. During that time, Siri and I talked, really talked, about fear, about responsibility, about the impossible future stretching before us. I don't want to be a symbol, I told her one night. I just want to be with you. She smiled softly. Then be. The bonding ceremony wasn't public. Just family, a few witnesses, and the quiet hum of Ilari memory singers weaving our promise into living history. When I spoke my vow, my voice shook, but I meant every word. Years later, I stood beside Siri on a balcony overlooking a rebuilt Karen station. Humans and Ilari walked the halls together now, no longer strangers. You know, I said, Your mother still terrifies me. Siri laughed, leaning into me. She likes you. That's her version of affection. I looked out at the stars, heart full and steady. Once I was just a human maintenance worker. Now I was part of something bigger. And it all began with a confession that stopped my heart. The galaxy did not change overnight. That was the first lesson I learned after everything settled. For weeks after the station crisis and the quiet bonding ceremony, life moved forward in cautious increments. Repairs continued. Trade routes reopened. Diplomats spoke in careful tones, as if afraid that one wrong word might fracture the fragile peace forming between humans and the Ilari. But beneath the surface, something fundamental had shifted. People looked at me differently. Not with fear, at least, not entirely, but with curiosity. Guards stood a little straighter when Siri and I passed. Station officials hesitated before speaking, measuring their words. I was no longer just a human contractor. I was recognized, and that recognition was heavier than any pressure suit I'd ever worn. Siri sensed it, of course.
She always did.
One evening, as Vale IX's storms painted the viewport in ribbons of violet lightning, she took my hand. "You're carrying this alone," she said. "I don't know how not to," I admitted. "Every choice feels like it matters now. Like if I mess up, it won't just be me who pays for it." She leaned her forehead against mine, her bioluminescence soft and warm. That is what leadership feels like. My mother carried it for centuries. I exhaled slowly. I never wanted to be important. She smiled. Neither did I. That was the moment I understood something crucial. We weren't symbols because we wanted to be. We were symbols because others needed us to exist. High Matron Illithra summoned us one final time before her departure. The chamber felt different now, less imposing, more honest. "You will remain here," she said, addressing us both. "Karen Station will become a joint administrative hub. Human and Ilari governance. A beginning." I blinked. "You're trusting us with that?" "I am trusting time," she replied. "And the kind of change that cannot be forced." She turned to me, her gaze steady. "You have already given more than most would. Do not believe that your worth is measured only by sacrifice." Then, after a pause, she added, "You may call me Mother Illithra if you wish." Siri's skin flashed bright gold in shock. I swallowed hard. I'd like that. For the first time, the High Matron smiled without restraint. Months passed. Karen Station became something new, not just a crossroads, but a home. Mixed crews worked side by side. Children of half a dozen species played in artificial gardens. Humans learned Ilari memory songs. Ilari learned human laughter. As for me, I still fixed things. I repaired life support systems, recalibrated gravity stabilizers, patched hull fractures after micrometeor storms.
The work grounded me.
Reminded me who I was before titles and expectations. Sometimes Siri would sit nearby, watching amused. "The bonded consort of an Ilari matron," she'd tease. "Covered in grease." "Don't ruin my reputation," I'd reply. "I'm trying to stay mysterious." At night, when the station quieted, we'd stand together at the observation ring, fingers intertwined, listening to the soft hum of the stars. "Do you regret it?" I asked her once. "Choosing me, this life." She didn't answer immediately. Then she said, "I regret nothing that brought me here." Years later, when historians spoke of the moment humans truly joined the galactic community, they wouldn't mention treaties or wars. They'd mention Karen Station. They'd mention cooperation born not of conquest, but of trust. And somewhere in the footnotes, barely noticeable, they'd mention a human maintenance worker and an Ilari woman who chose each other despite the weight of the galaxy watching. I was never meant to be a hero. I was never meant to matter on that scale. But sometimes, the universe doesn't care what you're meant to be. Sometimes, all it takes is friendship, a confession that stops your heart, and the courage to stay.